Welcome back to the Pop Astrologist Presents, where pop culture and astrology align. As you can see, I am with Mac. Mac is back.
Hi
Hey,
guys,
Mac. Hi, Carlina. Oh my God,
Carlina's here. Say hi to the
baby. Oh my God, cutie. Well, we had such a blast last time talking about all things Lou Taylor, which if you haven't already, definitely go check that
Please go
episode
watch.
out. But I thought we would reunite to talk about another controversial Scorpio, Katy Perry.
The woman of the week.
Ay, 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 for all the wrong reasons. Or the
Always.
right reasons, depending on which side of the aisle you're on. So which side of the aisle are you on, Mac? What is your bias going into this episode?
My bias going to this episode is that I have this wild belief that we should fund like real world Earth problems before traversing through space.
Mm-hmm.
And that billionaires should not exist. So I think that I've got a pretty strong bias against all things Blue Origin. And then Katy Perry, as a person, I've always felt like neutral and negative about, like not positive,
Mm-hmm.
but not like I don't just like actively dislike her. But the more that I
Mm-hmm.
come to know about her, the more I'm like,
Yeah, let's start with that because I actually think this is my thesis. The Blue Origin, of course, is was part of Katie's long-standing comeback plan to be
sure.
super relevant, to like be a pop culture like pop singer girly, and then she literally couldn't do it with the album, so she had to go to space.
Imagine having to go to space, like going to extremes on the most extreme level.
And she is a Scorpio, which
Yeah.
not only a Scorpio.
Major Scorpio energy. That stellium is loud.
I mean, Scorpio stellium. Boom,
Yeah,
boom, boom,
massive.
boom. Massive stellium, all in the first house. So I'm actually going to view this from a whole sign perspective, make things easier. All right.
Yeah, wow. Can you imagine? It's a
I mean,
whopper. I've never seen such a thick stellium in my career, I don't think. I mean, if I have, it's been few and far between.
let me introduce you to Blake Lively with fellow thick Virgo stellium of
Oh
five
yeah, I
planets.
literally just did a video about her, but I don't think it's this extreme because I have a Virgo stellium as well, and it's not in
She's got
this.
five planets in Virgo, but hers are all personal planets, Blake's. For
Sure, right.
Katie, she's got Pluto on her sun, of course, which is intense AF on top of intense with Sriracha AF hot.
Yeah. That's a tough one in any way you slice it. And then it's I mean, you're obviously showing a whole sign chart, but
Mhm.
I'm a Placidus loyalist, so
That's right. That's
seeing
right.
it, I know that's totally fine. It's just
You
that,
have
like,
to
to
back?
me, no. Whole sign is totally fine. I'm
Hmm.
just saying if we were looking at this at Placidus, her
Hmm.
Pluto Sun conjunction would be just before her ascendant, so it would be in her 12th house, which is I think a
Hmm.
tough place for. I have 12th house sun
Hmm.
in Placidus, but you know that Pluto conjunction in the 12th house is tough.
She's like a babushka doll, like
Oh
wrapped in
yeah.
layers and layers of.
Yes.
And she kind of looks like a babushka doll too, like her super campy, like pop bubble
Yeah.
gumness. Like it's all veneer. It's all
Yeah.
veneer.
Yeah. So is she sun, moon, and rising in Scorpio? That's
Yes, she's a triple
intense.
Scorpio in that way as well. Who is
See,
it?
that to me is because I don't know, is Blake Lively? I can't remember. She's not a Virgo rising, is
She's
she?
a Leo rising.
Yeah. So it's like
Mhm.
I don't know. Like all three, the triple threat in the big three is a special,
I was gonna
it's a
say
special one.
Bjork is a triple Scorpio.
Yes, she is. In fact,
Hmm.
you are correct in that.
And they
Yeah.
kind of have like similar theatrical
Fun house
kind.
mirror images of each other in some ways. The Bjork and Katy Perry triple Scorpio, they're very much products of their time in that Katy Perry is an archetypal millennial, and I would associate, I don't know what year Bjork was born, but I would see her very much as like a Gen X representation in a
Mhm.
very clear and obvious way. So it feels very interesting to see them, how that triple Scorpio manifestation has shown up in and of their time as well, because Katy Perry is such a millennial, and I say that as another tried and true like mid 80s millennial. We are undeniably the archetypes of that generation, and Katy Perry, I feel like it's such a millennial in so many ways.
Well, yeah,
Pluto
I
and
mean,
Scorpio in the sun.
I was gonna say literally voice of a generation, or not to say voice of a generation in that way, but she embodies an archetype, as you.
Yes, it's very illuminated.
And of course, Katy has gone through a lot of transformation in her life. She's known to have started out in this very Christian home, religious upbringing, playing a big role into this,
Yeah.
transforming herself from Katy Hudson, right? I think was the
Yeah, something like that.
Christian, yeah, something vanilla into Katy Perry. So that Scorpio transformation at work.
In the rumor, obviously it's just a conspiracy theory rumor. She was
Alleged,
John Benet
alleged.
Ramsey, that John Benet Ramsey somehow became Katy Perry is
Oh
such
my
a
God.
millennial ass, like, and Pluto on the sun, this horrible millennial tragedy and death and destruction, and then the Pluto, the revolution into Katy Perry is such a funny rumor for this person to have associated with them.
Oh, I love that. That cracked me up. And then when you know Katie to be a Pluto Sun person, you're like, of course, like it had
Yeah,
to work
naturally
that way.
she's the person, even though bears no resemblance, in my opinion, to John Benet's, in her youth. But that's just a funny thing. Wasn't she kind of in like a little bit of a culty Christian childhood background? Something was a little
Yeah.
creepy about
I
it.
think the story she likes to say, like tell people is she couldn't have like Lucky Charms, or she couldn't say like Lucky Charms because that reminded her parents of like Lucifer, just like a whole lot of random things, honestly, that you would hear that feel or sound very cult-like. It is interesting because you would think with all that religion factoring into her life, there would be like a more prominent ninth house. But I guess because the moon does rule her ninth house, like in her first, like this is very much part of her story, and almost like her transformation also reflects like her evolution with faith and spirituality, because it is still very important to her.
Yeah, okay.
Spirituality, I think. Seems like
Also,
it.
are we gonna get into the whole nun debacle in this
Oh, yes.
time?
Oh, yes.
Her
Oh,
going to like a battle with well, I guess the archdiocese was on her side, but going to a battle with the nuns, and I
well,
don't know, it all
it's
just is such an interesting lore for this chart, I feel.
you should actually tell the story because you brought this to my attention. This is actually what got me really hyped to want to do an episode on Katy Perry because admittedly, yes, I was kind of over the Blue Origin situation, but then it was like, wait a minute. What if? What if? So why don't
So,
you
okay, I
play by
was
play?
conversing with a friend about the Blue Origin situation, and she was like, well, Katy Perry damn near killed a nun, allegedly. Of course, we should have, seen this coming. I'm like, so she sends me a couple like paywall, like Business Insider news articles about an ongoing legal battle that Katy Perry was engaged in with some nuns over this really beautiful piece of property that Katy was attempting to buy from the Archdiocese of LA. And apparently these nuns, I think I might be butchering the story, but they weren't in the position to sell. The nuns claimed ownership to it versus the Archdiocese claimed ownership to it. So it becomes this legal battle. And one of the nuns, I guess, was confronting Katy Perry in the courtroom and had a cardiac event and ended up deceasing within that situation. So, but prior to the death of the nun, she made this documentary, which is still on YouTube. These nuns were like taking this feminist stance against the way in which they have been like denigrated by the church because of their status as nuns, and how this property that was given to them, bequeathed to them by the owner of the property, was like really co-opted by the archdiocese, and these priests were taking it over, and this whole long story. And then comes Katy Perry. Long story short, I ended up having a personal connection to it, and that like my Akashic Records teacher commented on a thread that I had posted about it,
Yeah.
because there was another individual involved in this litigation that owned several pieces of property around LA. One of them she was supposed to have her wedding reception at, and unfortunately, due to all this Katy Perry fuckery, the individual went into bankruptcy, and my Akashic Records teacher ended up having to like scramble to find a new location for a new venue for her wedding reception. So Katy Perry's out here really just ruining lives, is what I'm trying to say. From nuns
Wow.
to my sweet Akashic Records teacher, Michelle Pelizan of Holisticism. She's wonderful and did not deserve any of that. And I'm assuming that this gentleman involved with this didn't assume. It seems like Katy Perry is just on a war path of destruction, and she doesn't care who she has to hurt, including nuns. That was the story. That was my takeaway from it personally. You can do
That
your own
is
research.
that is incredible. We stand with the nuns.
We
We
stand with the
hashtag
nuns. May
stand with
the
the
one
nuns.
nun rest in peace, where the other one nun is, where their nun is today. I hope she's doing well. And I hope Katy Perry, I don't know how it ended up getting resolved. Also, that property was incredibly gorgeous. Katy does not deserve that property.
Stunning,
So
stunning. It's interesting you say Katie will like is set on a war path just to destroy. She has a Mars in Capricorn, right, as a chart ruler, as a Scorpio rising, and
whew,
Jupiter conjunct also.
yeah, yep. That's an interesting perspective. I also was thinking about, speaking of Jupiter,
Hmm.
she has a lesser Sagittarius stellium, but she certainly has one there.
She does. She's got a Venus-Uranus conjunction in Sag,
Yeah.
which is also, it's erratic, right? And it makes sense that she would go to space, Uranus and Sag and Venus and Sag, like that symbolism checks out. But
Yeah.
she also is, here's the thing, as much as I hate on Katy Perry or we gripe about her, she did have a moment where she really seemed to do no wrong in terms of pop music, and everything she touched really crushed it. I think she's like one of still the most successful of all time. I forget the stats specifically, but that is also very Venus Uranus in SAG.
Also looking at that 29-degree Neptune placement in her second house.
Yeah,
That feels
absolutely.
very pop music to me. Her incarnation came into play, and there was this dreamy landscape to her music that
Teenage
is
Dream.
associated with the early, like mid to late
Mhm.
aughts.
I was gonna say it was actually right around Pluto Capricorn because that was when I think Teenage Dream and that album and the massive success of that that
Yeah.
was in 2008. So you can see how
Yes.
Pluto moved into Capricorn for Katie. That would be her third house, and that really lighting up this Jupiter Mars conjunction, right? And also
Yeah.
catapulting her into another stratosphere of success, Capricorn, Mars as her chart ruler. So yeah,
And it
really.
was 2008, so kind of topical. What were we doing in 2008 as millennials? How were we disassociating in 2008 as millennials from the events of the political, economic crash? Well, we were listening to Katy Perry. We
Yes.
were we were delusionally at 29 degrees of 29-degree Neptune, just losing ourselves in the delusion. And Katy Perry was certainly a supportive agent of that for the
You
millennial
know,
generation.
I would argue Katy Perry is also a supportive agent currently in a different way of
1000%.
fodder,
Yes.
fodder as a distraction for real
But
shit
millennials are not
happening.
falling for it this time, bitch. We are not falling for it.
Well, I was gonna say part of, this again, part of the comeback, right? Happens to coincide very well with Katie's Pluto square and
Mhm.
Neptune square. She's going through her midlife. Wait, I think as a celebrity, it's actually really interesting to assess how the fans respond to what you're putting out as a function of how you're really supposed to approach your transits or your activations right now. Because clearly, what she's been trying to do has not been working, or what she has done before and that she's trying to replicate is not
It's
working.
really not working at all. It is flopping hard.
This is her flop era right now.
Oh, if there's ever been a flop era, it's like she's reinventing the concept in many ways, I feel. And yet she's not going away. It
Hmm.
feels like most people in her level of celebrity would be really like fading in this moment. And yet she's more in the discourse than ever, but not in ways that I would say are favorable to her image.
She's doubling down.
Yes, hard double down.
She released A Woman's World back in July of last year. I think I actually have
During the
there.
Brat summer, the
During
room was
Brad
not read.
Summer, yes. So as you can see, Pluto had just moved into Aquarius. Pluto has been moving into Aquarius since 2023, but 2024 was also the year she, I think, oh yeah, earlier that year, decided she was no longer going to be an American Idol judge after 7 seasons on that show. So this was like setting the
Okay.
stage. So very Saturnian also, right? The
Yeah, I
number
didn't know that she did
7.
a whole Saturn cycle of judging. I've not paid attention to American Idols since like the first season, so I couldn't tell you what's
Same.
happening over there. But that's
Carrie
interesting that
Underwood's
she
on.
was. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's interesting that she was committed for an entire Saturn cycle. That seems like a long time to me for something of that nature. Is that normal for the people that take those
Yeah,
roles?
I think they do have long-term type of intentions. And it kind of, I think, makes sense, right? Because she had a couple of albums, Smile, I forget what the other one was, but they weren't very successful. It was almost like,
No.
this may be her comeback, but she's been trying to come back. And so that's why she, I think, went over to the American Idol side of things and really found her solid footing, And then I think she also had a kid. And so it was just more conducive to her lifestyle. But then now she's ready to like go take on the world again, and the world has kind of evolved away from where she was. So it's almost like the break she took is the comeback that's happening right now. It's almost like it would have worked better maybe back then, but right now it's just out of
100%.
touch.
Yeah. In the context of Brat Summer and,
Hmm.
a Sabrina Carpenter pop landscape and Chapel Roan, and this is just not what the girlies were asking for. Not what the girlies were asking for at all. Maybe it would have made sense when she was like Hillary Clinton hype woman in 2016, but not now, girl. Not now.
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? Because her firework, I think, was used in the campaign a lot, and Roar, of course, was a big song you would hear on the political campaigns. But then Kamala, obviously choosing Brat Summer, or Chapel Roan, even,
Mhm.
right? Like Katie, I think, could have seen herself in that position. Certainly, if you think about a woman's world, like it was very prime for that kind of energy, but it fell flat because it was so hollow. It was a camp and caricature version of something that is
But it
effectively
wasn't
getting
even
taken
campy
away.
though, because it
No,
wasn't it
she
wasn't
she
it was done earnestly.
she was trying to backpedal after that, right? Like this was satire and this was da da da, and
But
you're
no, it
like,
was not. It was not. It was not. And that is interesting to me that, yeah, that's the approach that she tried to take rather than just sort of owning it as what it is.
mm-hmm,
I think that she really pivoted hard into this build up to this whole Blue Origin situation simply because I believe most people were under the impression she was going to be gone more than 11 minutes. Like I thought she was going to be up there for like 11 days, 11
mm,
weeks. I guess I never asked the question of like how long are these women going to be gone? I did not dream it was for 11. So
yeah,
I feel like this
yeah.
pivot into this like massive nothing burger of a story feels like related in some way.
It's very Neptune and Sag, as you kind of
Mhm.
described, about her pop
29
music.
degrees is like a last resort. The
In
second house,
space!
29 degrees, last resort, last ditch money making resort.
Of course, what did she do in space? She dropped her lifetime set list. The
Hmm.
butterfly. Ugh.
Not only was it a cash grab, it was such a misaligned like representation of values, and like they kept kind of her and Gail King, and they kept kind of trying to come back to be like, this is such an accomplishment for women. While women are literally being fired from NASA, like,
Hmm.
wow, girl, you are
Hmm.
so out of touch with the values of this nation and the people and the millennial generation that built you. Nobody is on your side with this.
It definitely feels very like Marie Antoinette, Pluto and Aquarius, right? Like it's very let them eat cake type of energy. And although there were maybe women on the plane or the rocket who deserved to have gone into space,
Why don't we hear
I
those stories? You know?
totally, totally. Amanda Wynn, amazing. Check her out. Aisha Bo, also check her out. Here's the thing, to your point earlier, the world is kind of just on fire, and it's the idea that where are we choosing to allocate resources,
Second
needs
house, yeah.
versus desires, right? Jupiter versus Saturn, which is actually
Mhm.
the times that we're in right now, because Jupiter and Saturn are doing this dance and they're
Yeah,
forming this square.
yeah,
So, needs versus wants, and this definitely feels like a want rather than a need.
100%.
At this
Because
moment in
they
time.
weren't even doing anything of note. They just went there and came back. Like,
Hmm.
what are we doing?
Yeah, it was, I mean, it makes sense that she would go to space under these transits, right? Because, you think about not space specifically, but that lot of fortune on her Neptune and Sag, and 27
Yes.
degrees is the galactic center also, right? So there is a lot about spirituality, divinity pulling her to the Milky Way. Like,
Base.
yes,
Yes.
I think
Yes.
something was pulling her there.
I
That
have a friend
symbolism is
who's I
interesting.
have a friend who's a galactic center scholar and a real
Hmm.
expert on these things, and I wish I would
Hmm.
have thought to consult with her about that before we talk. Yeah, her name's Ellie, Saturn Season Astrology for your galactic center needs.
Hmm.
I think that she might have some interesting insight on that because I didn't even really think about the fact that, yeah, that galactic center as fuck, and that natal Neptune at 29 degrees degrees loosely conjunct the galactic center feels wild.
It makes sense that spirituality and stuff is a big part of her life in like whatever capacity, whether it was such an intense spiritual upbringing, which we also see in Haley Baldwin's chart,
Yeah.
which you can also check that episode out. But like all I'm gonna say is as much as there's a lot of criticism around this, it is fascinating the manner in which it has come through in her chart. Now, could again it have been a better channeling of the energy? Of
Of
course, like
course.
nothing ever is an absolute.
Yeah, I think sometimes the galactic center can talk to us about like the opportunities that get placed to us in this incarnation. That is one element I think you can kind of look to in that particular part of the chart. Plus her lot of fortune being there as well. Or wait, that's the transiting lot of fortune, I guess.
But her lot of fortunes on her south node. So on some
Mm,
level, like she's had to bet on herself and really, you know what I mean? Like she's her
right.
lucky, it's her thing. She's no, it's me against the world. No one will get me. I
And
will get
those
me.
eclipses that came through a few years ago on the South Node had to have rocked that fucking stellium. That had to have been a time, I would think.
I think she had her daughter in 2020, Daisy. So
Okay.
it makes sense. You're a pop star, you're a mom now. What does that mean? And so I think you actually do see it play out right now with her Pluto square, as I said,
Mhm.
because in the fourth house, it's home, it's family.
Yes.
But who am I
Yeah.
underneath
Origin
it
story
all?
too, like reclaiming that origin story in a way I would associate with the fourth house.
And it's so kind of powerfully striking, right? Because it's a Blue Origin launch, and we're at this sort of
Oh, yeah, literally.
who am I? There's a rebirth and a real cracking open. And admittedly, like she's getting a lot of feedback, right? And it again, she's so stubborn. Is she gonna take it? But the reality is her North Node is in Taurus in the seventh house. Like she has to kind of
Listen to
cooperate.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. Like cooperate a little more.
Yeah. Yeah. That, I mean, I feel that's, her North Node, it's her lesson to learn in life. You have to be able to be in partnership with other people. Is she still with Orlando Bloom? Are they still a couple?
Okay, so that was actually a question I had wondered before because
Seventh
it
house, I asked.
well, it's interesting because I've heard rumors of them not. They're fiance. They haven't gotten hitched formally. Like they obviously have a child
Okay.
together, Daisy, reflective of the Daisy Katy Perry brought into space.
Got it.
So now from what I understand, they are still together. And let me actually, I have his chart. He actually has an A-rated chart,
Oh, cool.
as well. So they actually have both
She's
pretty
okay. So
interesting
she's the
charts.
center and he's the outer wheel.
Yeah, so she's in the middle, he's on the outer wheel. I mean, he's a Scorpio moon as
Okay.
well. And Uranus in Scorpio, like that checks out. Oh, and
Yeah.
Juno in Scorpio, that totally checks out, right?
Yeah, they do have quite a bit of synergy.
This is actually the first time I'm actively looking at them together, but holy cow, Jupiter also on the nodes, like,
Yeah,
hello.
that's pretty intense.
Yes. It's interesting, right? Because he was born in Jan and she's an October baby, yet there's a lot of overlapping synastry between the both. They're 7 years apart too, very
Oh, interesting.
Saturnian.
Yeah.
And if you think about Saturn right here, his Saturn is on her midheaven,
Is
literally.
she is sh Okay, I'm looking at he's the older one. Okay.
Yeah, Saturn
Interesting.
on the midheaven. That gives
That's
daddy.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. I can see how it could potentially work in certain ways,
Mhm.
especially for someone with a Scorpio stellium. I could see how that could be appealing to them. But
Mhm.
it is I had just frankly, and I don't know this person very well. I have no opinion of Orlando Bloom at all, but I did not realize that he was as old as he is. Not that he's old, but he's firmly Gen X, and I wasn't aware of
Mhm.
that. I thought he was around her age or a little maybe like an early 80s baby.
Should I double check that
No,
just in
I think that's
case?
probably true. I just
But Mercury and Neptune are conjunct, so there's always room for error here, which is also what people were saying about the Beyonce thing. LOL.
yeah.
Is like, could it be fake? Could it be rumored? 1977? Nope. Yep, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it. My conception of him was off, I think.
Mm.
Orlando Bloom is an individual that I don't think that I have ever learned anything about, like, consensually. He's not someone who
Yes.
I would ever really put any degree of focus on. I cannot think of a single Orlando Bloom project that's sort of coming to mind. He's just
Lord
not
of
in
the
my.
Rings. I was gonna say, if are you were you a Legolas? Were you a, you know what I mean? Like,
No,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
I have
yeah.
no capacity for, like, I have the type of autism that doesn't allow for me to like and have any sort of understanding of like fantasy. I can't like focus on it, so I've never been able to perceive that.
That is fair.
So I don't have any understanding of who he is. How long have they been in a relationship?
Uh, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they
Okay.
actually have been together longer than
It
you would
seems a
think.
while. Yes,
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 yes.
yes.
They've
When
been
did she
together for
part
a minute.
from
Russell.
he who is also quite newsworthy in
Oh
these
my
moments
God,
of our
yeah.
lives?
Hello, Russell. They parted December 31st, 2011 was the breakup text heard
Okay.
around the
Oh, I
world.
forgot about the breakup
The
text.
breakup text heard around the
Wow.
world.
To a Scorpio stellium. That's a wild thing to do. That's a
It
brave thing to do. I'm gonna be honest with you.
That is a peak Gemini thing to do, which is what Russell has. Okay, Mercury,
Mhm.
Gemini, retrograde, and Gemini sun.
That's
Like,
pretty fat stellium there himself.
and all in his and Katie's eighth house, you know?
Oh, girl, she did
Whew,
not talk to an astrologer before she got hooked up with this one. Or if she did not listen, because that's a
it's
run screaming synastry chart if I've ever seen one.
they've also got like opposing nodes, which is, you know,
Interesting.
like, I mean, it's they're whatchamacallit, they're different signs, but they're like very close in degree to each other orb-wise, but it also further adds to the we're headed in different directions and we're going about it in different ways on top of that. So like we just have a hard time seeing each other.
Yeah.
Scorpio and Gemini. Like, what would you say about that synastry? Because her Scorpio stellium and his Gemini, Mercury and Sun and South Node in Gemini, like he's VV Gemini, she's VV Scorpio. What does that synastry look like?
Not one that I could, in good consciousness, recommend, I would say. I mean, it seems to me like there's a lot of bringing out the worst in each other, is my
Mm,
initial sort of gut check on it.
yeah.
Or just
Mhm.
being fundamentally largely incompatible, but like Gemini curiosity and Scorpio's sort of determination feels like it could be something of a spark that would be very difficult to sustain. And
Yeah,
then I think
unless
it's
you're
very
willing to do the
interesting,
work.
unless you're willing to do the work, but I also think that would be primarily internal work. And
Hmm.
neither of these people give me a particular impression that that's something that they're keen on.
Hmm.
So not seeing it. I do think that it is very interesting that their nodes are essentially conjunct one another across, two different signs. That to me feels like there is some karmic connection to this pairing. But aside from that, like, I think if they didn't have that in their charts, I don't actually see the way that they would have maybe been able to build as much of a connection in as much as they did, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the story or the lore goes Katie pursuing Russell, like on Get Him to the Greek, and then they had a scene and got cut, and then she like actively chased him at the VMAs, and that was really when they like made out or something like that is
God,
from my memory
that's
of the time.
embarrassing.
Yeah, that's very first house Scorpio, right? And Jupiter Mars, like, I'm gonna get what I want. I'm super determined. And she's learning.
Yeah, sure, but that's what you want? Like, that's what's embarrassing to
Oh,
me. Like,
LOL. You know, she wants a funny guy. She lets Venus and Uranus in Sag. She wants a funny foreign guy. That's like her sweet spot. And here's the thing, she's found
okay, yeah,
another
that
foreign
checks.
guy in Orlando who's like kind of his own thing, right? Like it's a very different vibe than Russell, but she's basically, I think, looking for someone that is totally different. And I think by picking Orlando, she's actually chosen more like of that stability because he does seem
Sure.
more low key. Um, so on a
Yeah.
personal level, she's I think stabilizing and working it out, but then at the same time, it's interesting to see that she might have a quote unquote stable relationship, but like her career is like falling apart.
Yeah, I think that was a really good summary of it. I do feel like by comparison, Orlando Bloom has been a multi-year breath of fresh air from whatever sort of potential trauma this relationship could have imparted upon her. But
Hmm.
ultimately, it feels like she could be someone who is, especially in this like Russell Brand era of her life, like I can fix him type mentality, and
Mm.
that does feel like it ends in a breakup text
Mm-hmm.
from a Gemini
Yeah.
stallion.
No, it's interesting. So I have apparently what went down. Katie doesn't think Russell respects her parents' Christian beliefs or friends, a source told Us Weekly at the time, adding that the pair had gotten into a massive argument about where to spend the holidays shortly before their breakup. She was like, "Fuck you, I'm gonna do my own thing." Russell replied, "Fine, fuck you too." Which, hello.
Yeah, what I wonder if with that too is so
Mm-hmm.
interesting, because hasn't he pivoted majorly into like some sort of Christian persona now?
Yeah, he's like a Justin Baldoni type, right? Like a
Okay.
spiritual masculine type of guy who's trying to like do work around that archetype, I think, in the space. He has a podcast.
Ugh, gross. So I'm just also noticing that he has simultaneously an Aries stellium as well. That's hardy as hell.
Yes,
Uh,
indeed.
so that to me is almost as compelling as his Gemini stellium, in that he's got this Aries moon here,
Hmm.
and he's got these clusters of intensity in his chart that just
Hmm.
feels so unbalanced, if I'm being frank. I mean, I hate to be that critical of someone just based on their birth chart, but I obviously have a bias against this person as well, and I do not like him. But it's interesting. There's just this weightedness on his chart, and it
Hmm.
does feel in many ways contradictory to the weight on her chart, because she's also a double stallion person, and this doesn't really feel like the compatibility is was ever really there. It feels like there would have had to have been such a very forced situation on someone's part, and given that she has an enormous Scorpio stellium, it makes me feel like she was the one heavily holding it together.
And it makes sense also why he was like, "Oh, let me just throw it away over a text," right? And
Yeah.
in of
Yes.
itself embodies, I think, their energies because she was even still trying to talk around it. Like literally a month before they split, she posted some like she tweeted, that there are all these rumors and people say shit, but then literally a month later they broke up. So
Is that his Uranus opposite her Venus?
her Venus is in Sag and his Uranus is in Libra, but that is
Oh,
on her sun though. Like it's close. Again,
that
it's like that out of sign. So that's the thing. It's almost like there's a je ne sais quoi. What I would say to them is they have a je ne sais quoi. There's a certain itch I want to scratch, but it
yeah.
is a very triggering, intense type of scratch because it is going to be bringing up a lot of things and you're going to really need to do the work. It's not just going to be an easy, smooth flowing relationship. It's going to take negotiation and maturity to resolve.
Right. And his Uranian quality to her son makes sense to me.
Yes.
That feels like a really interesting synastry there as well. For something
They,
that could very easily destabilize you.
yeah, I was gonna say they also got married in India. They got engaged in India and then they got married in India, which is so Venus, Neptune, and Sag between like the both of them,
Yeah.
Like, oh, of course. Of
Yeah,
course.
shared delusion
Yeah.
in many ways.
This synastry feels literally emblematic of that relationship. And then, when we bring up Orlando synastry again, this feels more like they get each other. They're in lockstep.
Yeah, this is more stable for sure.
Hmm Like
Um,
the
More
Saturn's
intense.
grounding even rather than like onerous.
Yeah, yeah. That was my initial assessment of that
Hmm
Saturn midheaven overlap, is that it probably has grounded her. And it has, I mean, midheaven in her life being, her public ascension and her public visibility and her like career trajectory. Since being with him, it has brought kind of this stability, I think, to her presence, but it has brought a maturity to her external perception of her reality or her concept that
hmm
makes sense. I think that partially is from what's dating her to some degree
hmm
too, is that like you can't be in a teenage dream forever. Saturn on the
Yeah.
midheaven, connecting with someone whose Saturn is on your midheaven would pull you out of that, bring you into parenting and adult.
It is interesting too, right? He does square. I mean, that Saturn also does square, right? Katie's Mercury, her own
Yes,
Saturn,
it does, doesn't
moon.
it?
Like Saturn moon squares, that's also like difficult. Like that involves a lot of maturity. You have to
Yeah.
really be okay with that.
Yeah, 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 that would make sense to me. That, which I think if there willing to do the work
Mhm.
together could bode for a long-term, emotionally mature relationship, but it would
Mhm.
require a lot of individual emotional maturity to be
Mhm.
able to facilitate that long term.
I actually am curious to see what their composite looks like because earlier we asked the question, are they like what's what's up with them? Curious. So they're composite together, of course, Scorpio moon, they're Sagittarius sun, and they're Capricorn rising. Okay. Um,
Capricorn rising kind of speaks for that Saturn midheaven
yeah,
overlap.
absolutely. Pluto is coming for their moon soon. Not immediately, not right now, but soon. And recently we had that full moon in Libra, which again coincided with Katie, but going to space, I mean. But
Yeah.
that full moon in Libra was literally 23 degrees on her Pluto, Venus in
Interesting.
Capricorn.
Interesting.
I'm like, was Katie literally trying to run away from her marriage problems by going to space?
I think she was trying to run away from probably a like a set of her career problems, her marriage problems. It feels like very much like escapist qualities, both in like the immediacy of like what she's doing, but then also to your point, like the whole seeing it as a propaganda attempt to distract us from having the conversations of like what's happening with our constitution and what's happening, in even on earth climate change, all the things that this whole stunt was designed to kind of distract us from. On the macro, it feels like there's a micro element of her maybe trying to run away from certain realities and in her immediate physical world too.
Mm.
And then the stunt of like coming down and kissing the earth, it was just so like, ugh,
For
girl.
what it's worth, maybe because it did pull her closer to the galactic center. Maybe she is or will come back changed, but she's going to process it over these eclipses because they are
That
going
would
to,
make sense to me.
like maybe, and this is kind of like an interesting moment, right? Because they said she's going through her Pluto square, which usually, if you think about a Pluto square, it's this idea of what you have been avoiding actively coming up that
Yeah.
needs to be packaged or needs to be healed, needs to
Mhm.
breathe. And they have subconsciously been guiding your choices. And so it's the idea that your soul's awakening to this and wants to make better choices for itself. So
Yeah.
there's some criticism, right? And so in this case, Pluto is in her fourth house again of home family foundation. So one, you think about the marriage symbolism, that's interesting. Uranus is also in her seventh house of partnership. But then
Yeah.
you also think about maybe the way that the fans are reacting to her can also be mirrored in what's happening at home.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I would say that that would make a lot of sense in the context of what we're seeing in terms of like to your point, like the feedback that she's been receiving, which I'm sure there are some positive voices that are getting kind of drowned out by
She's
the
got loyal fans. She has,
the kitty cats or whatever they're called,
yeah, the Katy cats.
the Katy cats. But
Mm-hmm.
they're not, yes, she does, I'm sure. I'm not a kitty cat denialist. It's not the beehive,
Yeah.
it's not like, and I was gonna say this earlier about like the Harris campaign and
Mm-hmm.
they had Beyonce. Like they weren't really calling Katy Perry. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
she's still an A-list celebrity in many respects, but I would say she's fallen pretty far down the rankings of like the pop superstars of Taylor Swift, Beyonce, people that are selling out stadiums. Like she's not in their ranks in any capacity. So it's interesting to kind of the reconciliation with that might be coming through with this what seems like an attempt at maybe rebranding that fell really short.
She's also going through her Neptune square.
Yeah,
So
that's the piece that I find to be very interesting in all this too.
mhm. And that's in her for her as a Scorpio rising, this is Neptune has just left her fifth house. So fifth house with Pisces. So fifth house
Mhm.
is so much about artistry, it's fame, right? So the idea of the bubble popping.
It's
Like,
youth too, I would say.
mhm.
The teenage dream
Yes.
bubble.
Absolutely. And so now it's in her sixth house, almost like no one's saying don't be a musician, but I think understand your POV and understand, get connected to like real truth that's
Yeah,
coming
who
up.
is Katy Perry? Like I feel
Mhm.
like we don't really know. Like She came out 20 years ago-ish with like the Vans Warped Tour image of herself fresh out of like Christian camp and ready to like defy it all. Then
Mhm.
we went through like the I Kissed a Girl pop era, the California Girls era, and just nothing ever really spoke to an authenticity. And not
Mhm.
that like pop stars, there's an emptiness, I think, to the quality of her music that does kind of feel like Neptune and Pisces could have tolerated that a little bit more, but Neptune and Aries, I just don't think that you're going to be able to get away with that level of lack of self-disclosure in
Mhm.
your artistry to be taken seriously in a chaperone driven pop landscape.
You can do pop, but you can have it actually be truthful and authentic.
Exactly. And that's
Mhm.
something that I think is connecting to the major pop stars that have survived the Katy Perry era, which are really, Beyonce and Taylor Swift largely are the people that are going to be like the strongholds. Maybe Adele, there are a few
Mhm.
people that really like hold the throne, and Katy Perry has clearly been slipping from
Mhm.
that for a number of years. But I think at this point it's now this like sort of cultural trope almost that she's
Mhm.
of like facade of celebrity like the Kardashians. Like
Mhm.
it feels very interesting that you have Chris and Chloe, there at the launch. It feels like she's really deviating away from this facade of like pop feminism and into
Mhm.
this evolution that a lot of, I would say, older millennials, not all of us, but a lot of older millennials are falling into, of like almost like the boomerification of millennials, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
separation from what they had initially sort of been a representation of, and then moving into this new era where it's post midlife, what do millennials look like in that capacity. And I think Katy Perry is a really interesting example of that.
For so much talk about it's a woman's world, when I think about her Jupiter, Mars, and Capricorn, I kind of just view that as like a very masculine identification. Or when I say masculine, I mean like this type of capitalist version of
Yes.
masculinity that we have.
Patriarchal, hegemonic,
Yeah,
white supremacist,
exactly.
capitalistic perspective on it's very girl
Mhm.
boss. It's a rebranding of girl boss. Because if you really
Yes.
sit and think, what the fuck does a woman's world mean? Like,
Mhm.
what are you actually trying to say here, girl?
Mhm. Like, you're trying to
Because
uplift women, but it's like toxic positivity of just think harder and you'll get there. And it's like, no, friend.
yeah, and that's really not gonna fly in this era of contemplative pop artists talking about real shit. Even if that real shit is partying and brat summer, there's still so much authenticity that was coming through in the music of that particular summer that is so devoid of what she was contributing to the pop landscape in
Yeah.
her recent release.
It might have seemed like it was pop, but when you looked at some of the lyrics even, it's very existential? So
Yes.
again, no one is saying you can't have fun, you can't have nice things, you can't do any of these things,
No,
but
God
like,
no.
but it's the idea of how you engage with it. And is it a full understanding? Is it a like, are you just doing it for show? Like Neptune and Aries is all about like speaking it full with your chest stand down, and you have to come authentic as you are. And admittedly, we're still in this Neptune Pisces into Aries
Sure,
transition.
100%. It's still very fresh. But
Yeah.
I think there is something, and I'm not really sure where it is in her chart, so maybe you could shed some
Mm,
insight in this, but it feels like there's almost a resistance to reading the room with Katy Perry. Like a
yep.
real, just a outright bold defiance of what
Yeah.
the current mood is reflecting back. And I just don't see how that's a effective strategy at all for amounting a comeback or whatever it is, is intending to do.
Yeah. I'm trying to like see. Oh, there it is. There it is. I was like, I wonder if her Mercury is retrograde. And it's not in her natal chart, but progression wise, her Mercury has literally her Mercury is literally retrograde in Capricorn right now. I didn't actually look to
Mm.
see like how long it's been, but usually when it's retrograde, right, there's almost a sense of you're being asked to go inward and you're gonna potentially even be very counterculture to what everyone is saying about
Yes.
you.
Yes,
Um,
countercultural is a very interesting way of describing her in this moment. Yes, love
yeah.
that.
And she's got a progressed Mercury and Neptune conjunction in her chart, which is actually very
Oh,
interesting, right?
it
Because we
is.
are in a Mercury Neptune conjunction in Aries, and that happens to be squaring this progressed Mercury cap and Neptune, um, which actually is blowing my mind. So, sixth house, Mercury, Neptune, and Aries, work, routine, um, like grounding. And then that squaring this, what we identify with, we have to like reorient, restructure. Like this is not going to keep up the way it is. There has to be a more, maybe even like community centric or involving other people type of approach to this. It's interesting you bring up the billionaire crew and like like Chloe and Chris being there. I can see this North Node in Taurus representing, right, that wealth, that this sort of
Partnering, the seventh house partnering with wealthy people.
yes, yes, all over that. I know she grew up poor, could have had such an impact in a way that she's like got this scarcity mindset into like I gotta be successful at any cost consistently. Because she's also got Nessus, which Mara Alejandra, who's on to talk about Hailey Bieber, brought up this fixed star, that being on her midheaven. Nessus is a fixed star about obsession, like
Mhm.
compulsiveness. And so she is so obsessed about how she looks, her career, and like she's going to do everything it takes to be at the top, regardless of what that means.
That makes a ton of sense. Does feel like her what might have worked back in 2008 in the political climate of that, and being sort of this irreverent, like I Kissed a Girl, sugary pop music was at that time a little bit countercultural, but it worked versus what's
Hmm.
happening right now that is completely not working in an evolved environment, and her not being able to keep up with that makes some sense to me in this context.
Almost as if it's like, girl, maybe you should listen to what the alternative pop girlies are doing.
There's a number of ways that it's being done in the younger crop of artists. And I really think a Sabrina Carpenter comparison is very interesting with Katy Perry here, because I think there's a lot of what Sabrina Carpenter's image is being portrayed as very tongue in cheek, making fun of the overly girlified persona in a way that I think
Hmm.
Katy Perry also was at her day kind of connecting to. But it has with the way that it's being coming through with Sabrina, it feels inherently more sophisticated and mature, whereas Katy Perry's music has always felt a little bit obnoxious and very kind of manufactured messy girl,
Mm.
versus pop girlies of today that are bringing a level of authenticity to that type of irreverent personas. I also just wonder if maybe there's a pivot for her where music is just not her future, and that's okay. Maybe she pivots into some sort of media personality. Maybe she pivots into some sort of like daytime TV figure. Like, I feel like there's a future
Mhm.
for Katy Perry that doesn't include stadiums and music videos and, platitudes as album covers. And I feels like maybe that's something that she might use, that transformative quality of her natal Pluto Sun conjunction, to just become somebody that's aligned with her reality now, which is a late millennial mom who had a pop career and went to the space and now is doing something different. I worry that if she keeps on the track she's going to, it's just going to continue to alienate her from any type of fan base that she ever had.
It's interesting now that I'm thinking about it too, is maybe it's not about her switching her career. Maybe it's her deciding what her values really are. Like, if my values really are,
Yeah.
I actually don't give a fuck about everyone else, I should lean into that. I
Yeah.
should own it
There's a market
unabashedly.
for that because
There is a market for that.
there's a market for that now, maybe more than ever.
Absolutely, because the bifurcation and the class divide is so wide right now, and the wealth gap has never been more unequal to the point where she aligns herself with her target audience of the upper echelons of society. Then it's this idea of, okay, well, there's still other backers, and actually, I have more important backers. Like, I don't
That
need
feels North
everyone
Node and
else
Taurus in the seventh house to me.
in a low vibration way, right? Because it's not to
In
say
a
that
low
if you
vibration way, but yeah.
thing. It's low vibration based on my personal opinion, right? Like, if you fundamentally believe it is a woman's world and everyone should be lucky to be living it, because I have seen on my TikTok feed randomly just a casual video pops up one time. And this woman's talking about how all these women feel like they have to go achieve and do these things, but like just stand and like know that like we don't need this White House thing. We don't need this. We got this here. And I kind of feel like it's the same echoes of it's a woman's world and you're lucky to be living in it. Like, duh, but it's a very non-nuanced and layered and
100%,
inclusive
yeah.
take, right, of what's really happening here. So
Very white feminist, and
Mhm.
that has becoming her brand over many years at this point, whether she's done it consciously or unconsciously. So it feels like embracing it because her North Node is in Taurus. It is about her value system. And in the 7th house, it's going to be where, like, you know, people that will invest in the value that she brings. And right now, she has only really ingratiated herself further with this Blue Origin debacle into a very specific niche of people who idolize the Oprahs and the Kris Jenners and the
Yep.
Lauren Sanchez's and the people that are really representing a level of wealth that is so incredibly unthinkable to the average person. You know what, Katie? It's okay if that's what you want to go ahead and like align yourself with, because one way or another, it seems like that's what the landscape is shaping up to look like for her.
Yeah. So just because you have all these planets, like there are different schools of thought on how to look at it, right? But if you look at it from the perspective of, wow, my soul had to choose all these planets, all this Scorpio energy, figure out how to fucking transform, right? And like not just be obsessed or driven by money, power, and control, which is really like the Scorpio and Achilles heel, especially in resources, Taurus on the other side of it, right? But
100%, yeah.
Pluto will be making its way through her entire Scorpio stellium. So
Yep.
this is only the beginning. But at the same time, I think Katy Perry will actually be the figurehead, the same way she's going to be the litmus test for like where we are at as a millennial generation, to your point. Her fall is coinciding with the fall of the United States as part of its Pluto return. Right?
Damn, dude. Yeah. Now that you say it like that, holy
For
shit.
drawing the patterns where they
Ooh,
are.
that's striking.
We're at the beginning. We're at the
Oh
beginning.
no, I don't love
Right?
that at all. But
So
you're
Katy
right.
Perry is a very interesting marker for the devolution of how things are going. It's the idea that there is a
Recession indicator, Katy Perry.
recession. She is a peak recession indicator. And it's the idea that we need to transform. Something is not working. So that is a memo also to
Yeah.
all parties involved, literally.
Wow, that is profound, I think. Should we pull some cards? to see what-
Yes, please. Oh my gosh, I need to hear what the cards have to say about Katy Perry now. Like,
Okay. Past, present, future, just a really simple spread.
yeah, past, present, future.
I'm using the True Heart Tarot by Rachel True, which is a really fun and innovative take on Rider-Waite Smith by Rachel True of The Craft. You are a 90s witchcraft film connoisseur, as I am. Okay, so past for Katy Perry, we have Queen of Cups. That makes a hell of a lot of sense. I
Wow.
will elaborate in a moment. Present, 5 of Cups, again, checks for me, but I will explain why in a moment.
Great
And then
graphic with it.
the future, the star. Okay, I actually love this in context with the note we just discussed, because this has a lot to do with the current state of the United States. We also had the 3 of Wands come out rogue. I don't know at any point, so I'm just going to kind of read this one first. To me, the 3 of Wands is an important opportunity to restructure something, and to restructure something with the intention to build it to last. And the only real way to do that is in collaboration and community. So being able to use the precision of your words. So it's interesting that she's moving towards her progressed Mercury is retrograde and conjunct Neptune. So that would create difficulty around being able to do what the 3 of Wands wants us to do, which is to vocalize our needs and to deputize our community in supportive roles to be able to restructure a foundation for the future. So that's just a rogue card that came out, but let's look at where we're coming from with Katy Perry, Queen of Cups. This kind of feels some literalness, queen being sort of I would feel like a word that she would almost use to self-describe herself in many eras of her career leading up to this one. Queens are very much in the tarot opportunities for, once again, using a keyword we've talked about already, support. The queens to me are all about sourcing support internally and recognizing the need to like be completely accepting of oneself and to kind of be on one side regardless of their external circumstances. And to me, the Queen of Cups ultimately, I think, is a really good piece of advice for Katy Perry that she could work on using some acceptance around. Is that, like, with the Queen of Cups, to me, this is an indicator that you can understand how to traverse your own depths. That Scorpio stellium, of course, is all about traversing depths. Like, there's clearly a depth to her. That Scorpio stellium clustered in her first house, to me, speaks to an intrinsic depth that there is more below the surface with her. But to me, the Queen of Cups is understanding the fathoms of the depths that you can go to and recognizing when you do need to like swim up to the shallower end to be able to meet more people and be able to ingratiate more people to your cause. And, 20 years ago, or 2008, whenever that was, she was able to do that. She was able to
Mhm.
swim to the top and kind of create this sort of saccharine poppy connection to people. And now I think that what she's needing to figure out how to do is to then be able to explore more of what is beneath the surface and really take us deeper down, which seems like where there's been this resistance to. That resistance being, I think, represented really well with the Five of Cups in the present, which is all about grieving what was and letting
Mm.
go of, or alchemizing through grief what needs to be let go of, and like shifting our perspective to what is still remaining, shifting our perspective to where gratitude exists in our life. To me, the Five of Cups is the ability to be able to hold grief and gratitude in sort of a yin and yang connection,
Mhm.
to be able to see them as sort of two sides of a whole, to be able to hold both of them simultaneously without them counteracting each other. And if we're so usurped in grief for what was and we can't shift our perspective toward gratitude, we can end up feeling kind of cannibalized by the grief. Simultaneously,
Mm.
the same thing is true with gratitude. If we are just so wholly focused on like toxic positivity level gratitude and we're not acknowledging the fear of loss or fear of what we need to potentially like loosen our grasp on, then we can't really actually experience like pure gratitude and pure joy. So it
Mhm.
feels like there's this sort of resistance here, or this fives or track change energy. It's recognizing when something isn't working. And with a five and a tarot, it presents an opportunity to choose a different track. So it's about accountability for your role in something and to take responsibility by acting differently. So this is presenting the opportunity, I think, for a track change for her to be able to make a decision to not let that grief of what was cannibalize her, and to not lean so far into the toxic positivity of gratitude that it counteracts the fear of loss. Tying this back into like, which again, kind of a microcosm of a macrocosm of the teenage dream becoming the American dream, I think, and that fear, that resistance to grief, and also recognizing where we've been maybe toxically positive on our perspectives of gratitude makes a lot of sense in the context of like microcosm, macrocosm. And the star really brings that home of like the only thing that is going to get Katy Perry probably through to the future is an unyielding relationship to her own version of faith. And the star does come up for people that have like really heavily institutionalized religious background and have maybe shunned faith for a period of their life because of their rejection or
Mm.
rebellion from their internalized religion. And being able to restore faith in your own right in a way that feels autonomous, in a way that doesn't feel like faith is this sort of exchange that you're making for protection in some way, but faith is actually this like opportunity to connect yourself to things that feel bigger than you and to establish your own systems of belief, and to be able to acknowledge the grief and the gratitude that we just talked about with the star at the same time, and recognizing that there is an immense amount of grief that people are
Mhm.
experiencing, which I think would be a wonderful way for her to sort of take accountability for her role in the Blue Origin shenanigans and recognize the tone deaf quality of that, or recognize the inability to like really connect with the needs of real people. And I think there could be an opportunity for her to like take accountability for that, do some genuine soul searching, and then come back rejuvenated with an opportunity to speak to what is happening through the process of the American dream being eroded, through the Plutonian influence of the Pluto square that's happening in her own chart, and that is reflected in the consciousness of the United States, her being this sort of really interesting conduit for that, and to kind of emerge potentially on the other side of this, a voice that people really do want to listen to. There's potential for that, but it would require her to have this like unyielding belief first in herself and in the potential for the good in the world, and to really show up to that, which is available to her if she's willing to do the hard work of the track change energy that was revealed to us here. And also this ability to go deeper and recognize that there was success at the top, but you can't take all the people from the top down to the depths, but you can take some of them.
Mhm.
So that's what I've got for her. What does that bring
Wow.
up for you?
I love that. I mean, I just couldn't help but again feel like, she is embodying this teenage dream to American dream, as you just said, right? Like this idea of we as a collective too are currently in this weird place of holding on to past in such a way, make America great again. The reality is it was, maybe it was great for a period of time based on the economy, but
Sure, maybe for some people, you know.
right, exactly. And the reality is it was always just sugar on top. It was the icing on top of like actual cake. And like we had to actually now eat cake. And but it's not to say like you can't ever get back to that level, but it has to come under a different way. And it has to come under, you know, a lot more contemplation. We need to bake in the grief. We need to actually
Yeah.
confront this stuff, right? Our history, reconcile with it. We can't just run away from it. So, and we can't like lawyer a way around it. Like it just doesn't work like that. So, you know, that was actually a really beautiful card pull that dovetailed so much of what we were saying, or so much of what we're even kind of hypothesizing, right? As Katy Perry, the representative of our generation. And actually, it's really funny because Chris Brennan, the astrology podcast,
Yeah.
he has the same birthday as Katy Perry. I think Katy Perry is his chart twin. So
Wow.
it's
Like day,
interesting.
year, everything?
I
Like obviously
think
there's a year.
I forget. I think it actually could be the same. I don't remember exactly, but I know that he said it. She is her chart twin, and so when there was that weird eye situation, I think he had a situation too. You know, Katy Perry's had like these not blunders, but it's funny because Scorpio risings usually like you'd have one eye that always like is kind of interesting or gets fucked up. So
Wonder if my
yeah.
cat's is Scorpio rising because she has one weird eye.
Oh my gosh, maybe,
So
maybe.
she's squinting. You can't really see, but one eye's like got this like black circle around it.
Oh, baby, Carlita. Oh,
We don't know what time she was
cutie.
born. We don't know what day she was born. We don't even know really how old she is, but she just got a weird eye. So
All of that also then checks out. Is there any like downloads or anything coming through about Katy Perry that you wanted to share?
you know, God bless her. I don't have many opinions of Katie at this point. I feel she is on a journey like we all are. So
Mhm.
hoping the best for her, hoping the worst for Russell Brand, you know.
On that Russell Brand note, Mac and I have been trying to get together to do an episode on Me Too, which we will still get around to do
Yeah.
because there's a lot happening, of course, and we are just on the other side of this Venus retrograde. So you can definitely expect to see more to come. And I do think it is interesting now if you want to bake in the Diddy trials and Cassie, even like, you know, that is very
Yeah.
much part of the Me Too, right? In
I'm
a
like the
different way.
mommy blogger movements and
Everything all
you know
colliding.
everybody feeling like they've got an opinion that's valid is interesting. So
Jupiter
um
Gemini. Everyone's got
yeah,
an opinion. Everyone's got an
everyone's got an
opinion.
opinion. All right, well thanks
Amazing.
for having me on again. I super appreciate it. I'm Mac Jagger. You can find me at macjaggertarot.com and Mac Jagger on all the socials and all the good stuff.
Yes, we'll have you in the show notes below. And till
Wonderful.
next time.